This is chapter 9, verses 23 through 28. That's what our lesson will be today. It's all right. We've taken a lot of time already with what we've been talking about. So let's get into the lesson. And let's go down in verse number 23, and we will read it, and then we'll kind of go through it. It was therefore necessary that the patterns of things in the heavens should be purified with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices. For Christ is not entered into the holy place made with hands, which are the figures of the true, but into the heavens itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. Nor yet that he should offer himself often, as the high priest entereth into this holy place every year with blood of others. For then must he offer often have suffered since the foundation of the world. But now, once in the end of the world, hath he appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. And as it is appointed unto man once to die, but after this, the judgment. So Christ was once offered to bear the sins of many, and unto them that look for him shall he appear the second time without sin unto salvation. So we're summing up chapter 9. In the first few verses and the first 10 verses, we studied a lot about the tabernacle and the appointments within the tabernacle. They bring out all the aspects of the tabernacle and the holy place with the you've got the table of showbread, the altar of incense, and then the golden arbor. And then inside of here is the Ark of the Covenant. And so they bring out in the first 10 verses all about the insides of this and all the instruments that are in this. And what he talks about there is these all prefigure, these are types, these are a shadow of what is to come. And so all of this here, you had the, actually this, again, I'm doing this like it does in the books. East is this way, so it should all be turned around. But anyway, this is what we see in the tabernacle. You have the first sanctuary where all the priests, or the priests, would go in every day. They would make sure the oil is in the candles, and they would make sure the showbread was fresh, and then they would put the incense in here because they were doing the offerings all day. And so the altar of incense, there was a curtain here and a curtain here. In this part, the Holy of Holies, the priest went once a year. And that one time a year, he would offer first, he would offer for his sins. Why? He's human. He's a son of Adam. He carried with him the sins of Adam. He has gone into God himself in the holy place, the Holy of Holies. And he goes in and he first offers for his personal sins. Secondly, he offers for the sins of his family. Thirdly, he offers for the sins of the people. And there's something there, the last verse there was talking about he died for many. Understand that people every year would offer sacrifices for their sins. Does that mean that everybody that offered sacrifices for their sins will be in heaven? No, because they had to believe in the Messiah that would be shedding his blood one day for their sins. I hope you understand what I'm saying. These sacrifices could never take away sin. They were a figure of Jesus Christ, or of the Messiah that was to come. And some people would offer the sacrifice, and they would believe that sacrifice, that lamb, when John, at the beginning of John, when John the Baptist saw Jesus coming, he said, "Behold the Lamb of God, which taketh away the sins of the world." The people, the Pharisees and the scribes, understood that a Messiah was coming, and that he would shed his blood. He would be the Lamb of God. He would shed his blood and take away the types and become the person that did it. Jesus was there. John the Baptist saw it, and then they kind of were confused. Wait a minute. We're waiting for the Messiah, but we're not really looking for him. I'm going to say something today. The last part, let's just read this last verse. I'm always going the wrong direction here, it seems like. "So Christ was once offered for to bear the sins of many, and unto them that look for him shall he appear the second time without sin unto salvation." How many Christians today are actually looking for that glorious appearing of the Lord Jesus Christ? Well, one thing for certain, all of us will be surprised. All of us will be surprised. It's going to be a surprise. But, so we start out the book, the 9th chapter, talking about this. And then in verse number 11, we have some words that starts out. What are those two words? Verse number 11. So now for the rest of chapter 9, Paul is bringing in the fact that Jesus Christ stood in and became the sacrifice. It said, "But Christ, being a high priest of good things to come, by a greater and a more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands," that is to say, not of this building, "neither by the blood of goats or bulls," blood of goats and calves, "but by his own blood, entered in one time to the holy place, having obtained eternal redemption for us." Every year that priest would have to go in. Every year he would take blood into the and lay it on the Ark of the Covenant. Every year he would go through that curtain and do that. Every year, year in, year out, every year, descendant of Aaron. Actually the descendants of Eleazar and Ithamar, the two sons of Aaron, every year they would go in and offer a sacrifice to God. Every year, time and time and time, for over 1,000 years they did that. Well, actually, they laid it on the blood of that ark only about 900 years. What happened? The Ark of the Covenant was taken. Or what happened to the Ark of the Covenant? That's a good study. Really, it's not. What happened to it? Every year they offered. What happened to it? It's gone. When was it gone? When did it leave? What happened to the ark? Remember the tabernacle? They had the ark there, and every year it would, and then in the temple, Solomon's temple, remember the ark was brought in, and it was all established, and the presence of God came down into that small little holy of holies. And everybody had to bow away from it as God came in and dwelt in that. What happened to that? Israel's sin took him away. Ezekiel chapter 10, we find the Spirit of God, actually we find God leaving the Holy of Holies. And God walked out, or was out to the threshold, and then he moved out to the gate of the city. Then he moved out to the mount, actually where Christ will be coming back. Not when he's in the air, but after that, to usher in the millennium. And each time, and he left. The Spirit of God never entered the Holy of Holies again from that point on. Zerubbabel went back and built another temple. But there was no ark. The Ark of the Covenant was gone. It was taken either, all right, there's several things. I'm always doing something okay. Revelation chapter 11, and actually Revelation chapter, it's the two witnesses in Revelation chapter 11 in the very beginning. But Revelation chapter 11 and verse number 19, it talks about the ark in heaven. The ark of the New Testament, or the ark of the Testament, is in heaven. So, did God, when He leave, take the ark with Him? Don't know. We don't know. I don't have that verse real handy, but you can look it up. Another thing in 2 Maccabees, anybody hear of that book? You have. Yeah. Okay, you haven't, but your mother has. It's in the Catholic Bible. Yeah. 2 Maccabees chapter 2 and verses 1 through 8, they talk about the ark. Let me see if I'm getting this right. I think what they're talking about in there is Jeremiah took the ark when Babylon was coming and about to come into the city and destroy the city. Jeremiah took the ark up into Mount Nebo where Moses had been and hid it in a cave. And so the ark was lost in that cave. Nobody knew how to go where that cave was, how to get to where he put it. That's a second option. Another option is, some Jewish rabbis believe that the ark during the time of Josiah and his sons, during that period of time, that Jeremiah or someone took the ark and hid it under the temple. And so they believe that the ark is under the temple mount. Well, what's the problem with that? There's a Muslim mosque put there about 630 AD or 33 or whatever it is. The dome on the rock, so they can't excavate it to find it. But there are Jewish rabbis that believe the ark is there. And they're waiting to build the temple again and bring that ark back out. But the Ark of the Covenant was never in Herod's temple or Zerubbabel's temple. They built another one. And they still went in every year and offered sacrifices, but God wasn't there. God left in Ezekiel chapter 10. God left. So they were offering sacrifices. And then, of course, in 70 AD, what happened? Jerusalem was destroyed by Titus. The temple was completely destroyed. And they have never offered another sacrifice in a temple or a tabernacle. They've never had anything like an ark that they've ever offered sacrifices since then. Right? They were scattered throughout the world. And until March 14th of 1948, and when they returned, and they've been building it ever since, and they're hoping that someday they can build the temple again. But a lot of things have to happen. You and I know that Christ is coming again. And that the temple and the tabernacle and all this shedding of blood was just a type of what Jesus Christ did. And so as we get into this, our notes, we find in verse number 23, 24, that Christ took his offering into the presence of God. So when Jesus came and he shed his precious blood on Calvary's hill, he took of his blood to the Ark of the Covenant, he took of his blood into the heavenly tabernacle, and he deposited it there, and he gave an offering once for all. Why would Christ not have to give every year like the priest did? That was only a figure. That was only a type. Jesus being perfect, anytime that the priest went, he offered sacrifice for himself first. Why? Because he's a sinner. The very best of man is filthy rags in righteousness to God. You and I, our very best falls very short. We can be the most, what somebody would look at and say, oh, he is the most humble, the most holy. He is the epitome of righteousness. And all of that righteousness as filthy rags before the eyes of God. It's Christ's righteousness, not ours. There's none of us that are righteous. We have his righteousness within us. Thank God for that. Thank God for that. And so we find that first of all it was necessary for the patterns of things in heaven that to be purified of these. And then the next part of that verse, it says, but the heavenly things themselves were a better sacrifice than these. The earthly tabernacle had to be cleansed by the sprinkling of blood, and that done by the hands of sinful man. The heavenly could not be corrupted by sin. Thus the perfect, sinless Son of God brought his blood and fulfilled the corruptible pattern. Now here in verse number, in Hebrews 9 and 11 and 12, it says, but Christ being come a high priest of good things to come, by a greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is to say of this building, neither by the blood of goats and calves, but by his own blood entered into the holy place, having obtained eternal redemption for us. I mean, that's a hallelujah song there. Do you deserve it? No. We deserve hell. But he shed his precious blood and has taken that to heaven that we, you, and I might have eternal redemption. How long is eternal? Yeah, it's a long time. I don't fully understand it. But it's forever and ever and ever. Christ has not entered into the holy place made with hands, which are a figure of the true. Christ did not enter in the earthly tabernacle with his sacrifice. There was no need for him. That was a figure. That was a type. Christ took his sacrifice all the way to heaven and dropped it off before the judgment seat of God, on the throne of God. Hebrews 8:1 says, we have such an high priest who is set on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heavens. Next, but in heaven itself is where he took it, now to appear in the presence of God for us. What is he doing there? He's appearing in heaven for you and for me. Anytime you pray, we have one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus. He is our mediator. He is the one that's... You know, folks, when we pray, I want my prayers to be so good and so clean, and I want my prayers to honor God. I want them to. I want to be a blessing to God. I want God to look and be proud of me. I want things to be right. But do you understand that in that prayer, any prayer that I pray, all that Christ does is take what little bit in my heart that needs to be presented to God and presents it to Him. There may not be much. Matter of fact, a lot of my prayers, there may not be anything in it worthy of going before God. But He takes what's in our heart. He's our mediator. He cleans up our prayers and gives them to God the Father. He is our mediator. All right, and in verses 25 through 26, Christ's offering is a one-time sacrifice. Nor yet has that he should offer himself often as a high priest who entered in the Holy of Holies every year by the blood of others, for then he must often have suffered since the foundation of the world. I mean, sin has been here since Adam. If Christ had to go back and offer for the sins every day, every week, every time, every year, that don't make sense. Because all the way from Adam to you and I, sin has been in this world. And from Adam all the way to the time of Christ, everything that was offered at that time was a prefigure, a figure, a pattern of the things that were come when Christ did. Christ fulfilled all of the patterns. So, by the which we are sanctified through the offering of the blood or the body of Jesus Christ once for all. Remember in Hebrews chapter 6, Paul is reminding these young Hebrew Christians, you want to go back to the old way? You want to go back to the Jewish law? You want to go back to the offerings every year, the blood sacrifices every year? You want to go back to that? How are you going to get back? Hebrews chapter 6, it's like you're putting him to an open shame. You want him to be sacrificed all the time for you. He was sacrificed once. That ought to be good enough. Nor yet he that offered himself often as a high priest entered in the holy place every year with the blood of others. But for then must he often have suffered since the foundation of the world. But now, once in the end of the world, hath he appeared, put away the sin by the sacrifice of himself. He came one time. That's enough. He was a sinless, perfect Son of God. He was a Son of man. He was a Son of God. Christ died that we might have life. Why did Christ die? He died that we might have life. As it is appointed unto man once to die. Today, Pastor is going to be here, and he's going to be teaching Revelation chapter 4. And some of my most exciting and favorite words in the Bible, all of them. But in Hebrew and Revelation chapter 4, Come up hither. Now, from Hebrews chapter 4 on through the book of Revelation, the saints of God are in glory. And we're viewing things from there. But also in Hebrews chapter 11, Revelation chapter 11 and verse number 12, we see these words again. And that was the two witnesses. The two witnesses that were there, that were slain and left in the city, in the streets of the city for. And remember, it says that the whole world would watch them. I remember when I used to preach this back in the 70s, and I would think, well, how can that happen? They did have TV back then, but now we have computers. We see things happening instantaneously. We watch them while they happen. I mean, it's an amazing thing. And so, anyways, that's the come up hither. We're going to be seeing that. And then it says, but after this, the judgment. You know, there's at least two judgments, but I think there might be a third. What happens when a lost person dies? When a person dies, there is a judgment. What I'm saying by that is, okay, when a person dies, if he's saved, his soul goes here. If he's lost, his soul goes there. Now, there's going to be a judgment seat of Christ where, at that point in time, in a judgment seat of Christ, you and I will be judged for our works, what we've done in the flesh for the Lord. And that doesn't mean I'm here, you're there. That doesn't mean I'm better than you. You understand that? It has nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it. A janitor in a church that's faithful will be greater, have greater rewards than many preachers. It's just a fact of life. Then there's also the judgment seat, or the great white throne judgment. I think Revelation 19 or 20, where those folks are brought up and then taken away, and they have a place in hell forever. We're saying here, as it is appointed unto man once to die, but after that, the judgment. And then it says, so Christ was once offered to bear the sins of many. Wherefore he is able to save the uttermost and to come to God by him, seeing he ever liveth to make intercession for them. Hebrews chapter 7 and verse number 25. And walk in love, and as Christ also hath loved us and given himself for us, an offering and a sacrifice to God for a sweet smelling savor. Ephesians 5:2. And the Father has given up the Son. He that spared not his own Son, but delivered him up for us all, how shall he not freely give us all things? And then he's there to bear the sins of many. He died for all. Christ died for all. But everybody's not going to get saved. Everybody's not going to heaven. Only those who put their faith and trust in him, who his Spirit has moved in their hearts. And then, unto them that look for him at appearing the second time. We've already talked a little bit about that. All right. Next week we get into chapter 10. Pray for our pastor today as he's be here in a little bit, and probably a little weaker than he was last time you saw him, but maybe not. He feels like he's getting stronger from what they've done. So we're just excited to begin to hear from him. All right, Father, thank you for your love for us. What a great God you are. We are humbled every time we come into your presence and we think about your mightiness. We think about the shed blood of your precious Son who gave himself and whom you gave up to be our sacrifice once for all. Father, thank you for that. And Father, thank you for this church and these wonderful people. In Jesus' precious name, amen.